All right, we're still on Unit 3, System of Equations. Last time we talked about system of equations by graphing. So we graphed some lines, and wherever those lines intersected, that gave us our solution or our answer to that specific system. Today we're going to start by graphing them algebraically. So there's two methods. The one we're going to talk about today is the substitution method. So this is on page 5 in your packet. And so the substitution method is a method of solving system of equations by substituting equations within one another. All right, so next are the steps. So the first step, you want to solve one equation for x or for y. Then you want to substitute this expression into the other equation and solve for the variable. Whatever variable is left, that's the one that you're going to solve for. And then you're going to substitute your answer into the revised equation from step 1 and solve for the other variable. Now, I know that seems really complicated, but as we go through and do some examples, it'll make a lot more sense. These steps you do not have to memorize. You can use your packet when you take the test. So you'll have these steps here, and then I also have the steps posted on my wall in the room. There's a poster over by the windows. That will also be up there when you take the test. All right, so let's look at the first example. All right, so I'm going to go through each of these talking about the steps so that you can get used to how the steps work, so that it'll just become a routine for when you see something like this. So step 1, solve one equation for x or for y. So that means you want your equation to say y equals something or x equals something. Okay, and if you look at these two equations we have, they're both solved for y. So we can move on to step 2. Step 2 says to substitute one of these expressions into the other equation and solve for the variable. So to make it easy, I'm going to take my second equation, 2x minus 5, and I'm going to substitute it in for y into my first equation. Which leaves me with 2x minus 5 equals 4x minus 1. All right, when you substitute it in and you're looking at what you've been substituting, you want to make sure that you only have one variable. So looking at these equations, the only variable that I'm looking at is x. So when you notice that, that's good, and we can move on to the next step, which is solve for this variable. So when you're solving for x, you want to make sure that you can get all of your x's onto the left side, which would be this side over here, and you want to get all of your regular numbers onto the right side, which would be the side with the green star. So we're going to move our x's first. So this 4x right here has to move to the other side. So in order to do that, it's positive, so I do the opposite. So I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. So these 4x's can cancel, and I'm just left with negative 1. And then I subtract 2x minus 4x, which will give me negative 2x. And then I bring down the minus 5. All right, now that all my variables are on the left side, I need to move all my regular numbers to the right side. So this negative 5 needs to move to the left or to the right side. So to move a negative 5, I do the opposite. So I add 5 to both sides. So that gives me negative 2x equals positive 4. because negative 1 plus 5 is 4. All right, so I ran out of room, so I'm going to bring this up here. So negative 2x equals 4. So my last step to solve for x is to get it by itself. So to move that negative 2, I divide by negative 2 on both sides. 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2. All right, so we are done with step 2. So step 3 says substitute your answer into the revised equation from step 1 and solve for the other variable. So we don't have a revised equation because both of our equations were already set up as y equals or x equals. So what I'm going to do is just plug that negative 2 into my first equation. So I'm going to take this first equation, y equals 4x minus 1, and I'm going to replace the x with negative 2. This right here you can plug into your calculator. And that is going to give me negative 9. So now I have an x equals something and a y equals something. You are going to have that with every single system of equation problem. So that means we're going to write our answer as an ordered pair, which is going to be negative 2, comma, negative 9. All right, let's move to example 2. So we have y equals negative 6, well, y equals 6x, and 2x plus 3y equals negative 20. So looking back at our steps, solve one equation for x or for y. So do we have an equation that says y equals something or x equals something? Yes, we do. Our first one, it's y equals 6x. So I'm going to move on to step 2. I'm going to substitute this expression, which is whatever comes after the equal sign, so this expression as in 6x, into the other equation and solve for the variable. So I'm going to take that 6x and I'm going to substitute it into the second equation for the variable y, because that's what it is equal to. So I'm going to have 2x plus 3, changing this y to 6x, equals negative 20. Now looking at this, remember I want to check to make sure I only have one variable in this equation, which I do. My one variable is x. So I can move on and start solving for x. So remember, we want to get all of our variables on the left side and all of our regular numbers on the right side. So first I have to get rid of this parentheses. So I take 3 and I multiply it to 6x, which gives me 18x. Now I have like terms, so I can combine these two things together. So 2x plus 18x is 20x. All right, so now all of my letters are on the left side. All of my regular numbers are on the right side. So I can finish solving for x. So I have to get x by itself. So I'm going to divide both sides by 20. So x is going to equal whatever negative 20 divided by 20 is, which is going to be negative 1. All right, now we're on step 3. So I'm going to substitute this answer into the revised equation from step 1 and solve for the variable. So I'm going to take y equals 6x and I'm going to plug negative 1 in for x because that's what x equals. So I have y equals 6 times negative 1. If you type that in your calculator, you'll get negative 6. So then remember, we always write our answer as an ordered pair. So negative 1, negative 6 would be our solution. All right, looking at number 3. Y equals x plus 9 and 3x plus 8y equals negative 5. So step 1, solve one equation for x or for y. So looking at this, we already have that, okay? This first equation, y equals x plus 9, is solved for y. So that means I'm going to take x plus 9 and I'm going to substitute it in for y into my second equation. So my second equation is 3x plus 8y equals negative 5. So I'm going to have 3x plus 8, replacing that y with x plus 9 equals negative 5. So now I have to stop and check. In this new equation, do I only have one variable? And the answer is yes. The only variable we're looking at is x. So I can continue on. All right, when solving, you want to get rid of the parentheses first. So I need to distribute this 8 to the x and to the 9. So 8 times x is 8x, and 8 times 9 is 72. Then I just bring the 3x and the negative 5 down. All right, remember, we want all of our letters on the left side and all of our regular numbers on the right side. So I need to move this positive 72 to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 72 from both sides. So that actually gives me negative 77. And then 3x plus 8x, we can combine and make that 11x. Now I'm going to divide both sides by 11, and x is going to equal negative 7. All right, so step 3, we're going to substitute our answer into the revised equation from step 1 and solve for the other variable. So I'm going to take my y equals x plus 9, and I'm going to change x to negative 7. So now I have y equals negative 7 plus 9, which is going to give me 2. So my solution is negative 7, comma 2. All right, looking at number 4, we have x equals 4y plus 7 and 2x minus 6y equals negative 12, or equals positive 12. So we're going to solve one equation for x or for y. If you look, our first equation is already solved for x. So that means I'm going to take this 4y plus 7 and I'm going to substitute it into the second equation for x. So I'm going to take my second equation, and wherever there's an x, I'm going to put a 4y plus 7. So I'm going to have 2 parentheses, 4y plus 7 minus 6y equals 12. All right, when you're solving, you want to get rid of the parentheses, so I distribute the 2, which distribution, that means multiplication. So 2 times 4y is 8y, and 2 times 7 is 14. And I bring down the 6y and the 12. So we want to get our regular numbers on the right side and our letters on the left side. So I need to move this positive 14 by subtracting it. So these cancel, so I'm left with negative 2. And then I can actually combine, I can actually combine 8y and negative 6y, which will give me 2y. And then I divide by 2 on both sides, so y is going to equal negative 1. All right, so step 3, we're going to substitute our answer into the revised equation from step 1 and solve for the other variable. So I'm going to take our first equation and I'm going to substitute -1 in for y. You can type this into your calculator, and it should give you 3. So remember, an order pair goes x comma y, so this is going to be 3 comma -1 for our solution. All right, let's look at page 6. All right, number 5. We have 2x plus y equals -2 and 5x plus 3y equals -8. So step 1, solve one equation for x or for y. So we do not have an equation here that already says y equals da-da-da or x equals da-da-da. So I'm going to have to rearrange one of these equations so that we have that, so that we can continue to solve using substitution. So now we have to figure out what equation we're going to choose. So looking at our two options, I want to pick the equation where there is a variable without a visible number beside it. So like, for example, this x has a 2 beside it, this x has a 5 beside it, this y has a 3 beside it, but this y, there's no visible number. We know it's the number 1, but there's no number sitting right there. So since this y doesn't have a visible number beside it, I'm going to take that equation and I'm going to solve it for y. So to do that, you have to get y by itself. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides, and I get y equals -2x minus 2. So now I have an equation that's solved for y, so I can move on to step 2. So step 2 says, substitute this expression into the other equation and solve for the variable. So I'm going to take 2x minus 2 and substitute it into the second equation for y. So I'm going to have 5x plus 3 parentheses -2x minus 2 equals -8. So now I'm going to check, do I only have x's here? And I do, so I can continue moving forward. So we want to get rid of parentheses first, so I'm going to take my 3 and distribute it to the two things inside that parentheses, which again is just multiplying. So 3 times -2x is -6x. 3 times -2 is -6. I'm bringing down the -8 and the 5x. So we want to move all of our numbers to the right side and all of our letters to the left side. So I need to move this -6 to the other side, so I'm going to add 6. So -8 plus 6 is -2. And then I can actually combine 5x and -6x, and that gives me -1x. Now I'm going to divide both sides by -1, so x is going to equal +2. All right, now step 3, we are going to substitute your answer into the revised equation from step 1 and then solve for the variable. So I'm going to substitute that into my revised equation, which is this right here. So y equals -2x minus 2. I'm replacing x with a 2. This can be typed into your calculator. Which would give us -6. So your answer should be 2, -6. All right, let's look at number 6. So we have 2x minus 3y equals negative 11. 2x plus y equals 9. So remember, you want to find the equation where there's not a visible number beside it, which in this case is going to be the second equation, and we're going to solve it for y. So to do that, I have to move 2x to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. So y is going to equal negative 2x plus 9. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to substitute it into the first equation for y. So I'm going to have 2x minus 3 parentheses negative 2x plus 9 equals negative 11. I want to check and make sure I only have one variable, which I do. My only variable is x. So the next thing to do is get rid of the parentheses. So I'm going to take this negative 3 and distribute it to both things in the parentheses. So negative 3 times negative 2x is positive 6x. Negative 3 times 9 is negative 27. Oops, not 29. Then I bring down the 11, and I bring down the 2x. All right, we want to get all of our regular numbers to the right and all of our letters to the left. So I need to move that negative 27 to the other side. So I'm going to add 27 to both sides. So that is going to give me 16, and then I can actually combine 2x and 6x, and that will give me 8x. So now our last step to solve for x is to divide both sides by 8. So x is going to equal a positive 2. All right, so now we're on step 3, so I'm going to take that answer and substitute it into my revised equation from step 1. So I'm going to have y equals negative 2 times 2 plus 9. You can type this in your calculator, and that would give us a positive 5. So my answer would be 2, 5. All right, so we're not going to do all of these. I'm only going to do 2 more problems to show you the 2 special solutions that you could have. But if you wanted to work out the others, I'll add the answers on here so that you can have them to check your work if you wanted to do those extra problems for some extra practice. So we're going to do number 7 and number 9. So number 7, we have x plus 5y equals 4, and 3x plus 15 equals negative 1. So neither of these equations are already solved for a variable, so we have to solve one for a variable. And I'm going to pick the first equation because x does not have a visible number beside it. So I'm going to solve it for x. So in order to do that, we have to get x by itself. So that plus 5y needs to move to the other side. So we do the opposite and we subtract. So that leaves me with negative 5y plus 4. All right, now I'm going to take the expression and I'm going to substitute it into the second equation for x. So I'm going to have 3 parentheses, negative 5y plus 4 plus 15y equals negative 1. All right, so checking this, we only have one variable, and that's y, so I'm going to continue solving. So I'm going to distribute my 3 into parentheses. Remember, that's just multiplication. So that's negative 15y plus 12, because 3 times negative 5y is negative 15y, and 3 times 4 is 12. Then I bring down the plus 15y and the negative 1. All right, so now remember, we need to get all of our regular numbers to the right and all of our letters to the left. So I need to move this positive 12 to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides, which is going to give me negative 13. And then I can combine negative 15y and positive 15y. And when you do that, you actually get 0. So now we're left with 0 equals negative 13, which this is not a true statement because 0 does not equal negative 13. So that means that this system will have no solutions. So if you're working out a problem and your variables cancel out, which is what just happened here, those canceled and left us with 0, that means that there's going to be no solution. All right. Number 8, we're going to skip, but if you want to work it out and check your answer is 8, negative 2. And we're going to do number 9. So we have 6x plus 3y equals 54 and 2x plus y equals 18. Neither of these equations are solved for x or for y, so I'm going to look and find the one where there's a letter without a visible number beside it, which is going to be the second equation. And I'm going to solve that equation for that letter. So I'm going to solve this equation for y. So I'm going to move that 2x to the other side. So that leaves me with y equals negative 2x plus 18. All right, now I'm going to take that and I'm going to substitute it into the first equation for the letter y. So I'm going to have 6x plus 3 parentheses negative 2x plus 18 equals 54. I'm going to check. We only have one variable here, so I can move on. I need to get rid of my parentheses, so I'm going to distribute. 3 times negative 2x is negative 6x. 3 times 18 is 54. We want all of our letters to the right, and we want all of our letters to the left and all of our numbers to the right. So I need to move this 54 to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 54 from both sides, which gives me 0, because 54 minus 54 is 0. And then I can combine my variables, so 6x minus 6x is also 0. So when you are working out a problem and you end up getting 0 equals 0, that means that these are the same exact line, which means there's going to be an infinite amount of solutions. All right, number 10, if you wanted to work it out, your answer would be negative 2, 0. And number 11, if you wanted to work it out, would be negative 1, 5. All right, so that concludes the notes on the substitution method for solving system of equations.